Welcome back to part 2 of Dana and Robert's story. Dana's husband has just been diagnosed with a brain tumor. He's in palliative care, and the world is shutting down due to a global pandemic. This is Every Widow Thing.
And I remember there were 2 nights that were really, really long. And the first one was that January 1st, that night that we stayed in the hospital waiting to find out what type of tumor it was after the first MRI. And then the next one was that night when she called and said, I'll be there at 8 a.m. I'll never forget her coming in and telling us. So we found out like February 25th, and he ended up getting really sick and ended up being hospitalized at MD Anderson and was in palliative care when COVID hit. So that was February 25th. March, COVID hits. Kids' school closes down. I'm at MD Anderson. I have to hire a new nanny, so I have somebody to come there to help.
And are they allowing you to stay in the hospital? Because
they allowed me to stay, but then I remember one day my girls had just come in and wanted to go see their daddy. It was the first day they had come in to see him and hadn't seen him like in probably a week. And they stopped him and said no. And I said, no. They're on the list because I'd already talked to the chaplain and other people. I was like, no. They're on the list. They're allowed to. No children under 12. I'm like, yes, you call. I mean, I just started.
What was that rule all about?
Because children are, germ carriers.
And it was like, COVID.
But it was limited. I mean, they would go in and see him and then leave, and then we'd come back. And but they did help me make sure the girls understood that this was not curable and that he was going to die. So the day that they found that out, we were actually in a waiting room in palliative care, and they helped me talk to the girls. He spent 10 days at MD Anderson in palliative care because they told us pretty immediately that he wasn't going to qualify for the Moonshot program and that really they wouldn't do anything.
What's the Moonshot program? Is that like a trial?
Yeah.
Like
it's
some
like
kind
trials.
Of immunotherapy or?
It's trials. And I don't remember specifically which one we were going into, but they said that he just didn't meet the parameters because he was already way too sick.
Yeah.
I don't know who could meet parameters on a glioblastoma. It's just, I think because of the location of it too. It was affecting his ocular nerve and his inner ear. So when he would sit up, if he would try to sit up straight, his whole body would lean. He would lean because he couldn't regulate. It's like having terrible vertigo.
So how is he reacting to this news? And you as a couple, what kind of conversations are you having? Can you even have difficult, long, or even meaningful conversations?
They were not long, but they were meaningful. We did, when he was in the hospital at St. David's during that first few weeks, we did make some recordings for the girls one night because his blood pressure was up and down and this and that. We had so many different things going on, and we made these recordings of things that he wanted to tell the girls, just in case he didn't make it.
Yeah.
And recently, Vivian was able to listen to hers. She requested to listen to it, and I wouldn't let her. And then when she went...
That gives me chills.
Yeah, it's hard to listen to. And I actually listened to it with my therapist the first time she requested it. I said, she's not ready. But my oldest daughter, Vivian... we all have our own grief journeys, and, our kids do as well. And my oldest daughter, Vivian, actually went to wilderness therapy in January of this year. And it was life-changing for her. It was amazing coming of age and dealing with her grief. But in the wilderness in Idaho, she listened to the recording with her therapist. It was very impactful for her to hear that. I will say I was part of that video, recording. And I remember listening to both the girls' recordings with my therapist and thinking, God, I wish I had one.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's something to share with our listeners. Like, hey, don't forget about you.
Yeah.
Don't forget about your relationship.
Yeah.
Because you do you tunnel on the kids. I mean, I know I did.
Yeah.
You just tunnel vision on the kids and what they need. And sometimes you forget what you need.
When you left MD Anderson and came back,
We came home.
so he came home from MD Anderson.
Yeah.
And went into hospice at home.
Yes.
What does that look like?
So when we were at MD Anderson, I was still so overwhelmed, and I had my kids, and I'm trying to figure out homeschool at this point. Like, what's this going to be like? Because
The school's closed.
Right,
and-
because it's the middle of COVID.
and
Oh my gosh.
I've negotiated, and even when I was at MD Anderson, I was still reading all the contracts and negotiating, bringing in a business partner who I was, basically selling half of, or about 85% of our practice to. We had a very large practice, and we needed to announce to clients what was going on because our clients were very close to Robert too. I mean, he was their guy. I have some elderly clients who are like, Robert's always been my guy. Who what? I have to talk to somebody else now.
Yeah.
And as much as they knew me, basically, I spent, after we got home from MD Anderson, I spent the first. I guess we retired him on March, I think it was 24th, which was like the worst day in the market. So think about the financial turmoil that's going on and all the hand-holding that needs to be done.
Lots of moving pieces. on your
And
end.
COVID, and the kids are at home. And now, oh, by the way, here you have a new financial advisor. But I hope you trust him because Robert does and I do. And I'm still going to be here. My name's still on the door. So I spent 8 to 10 weeks doing phone calls with every client and introducing them to my new business partner.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And letting them know that Robert was retiring and that he was dying.
I just can't imagine knowing that it's because we were all sudden deaths. So when you know and there's nothing, it's not like you're still fighting for it, or for healing.
Right.
Well, it's sort of that pre-grieving, right? That we didn't have. You're already grieving. I think Tim talked about it a little bit too with his wife's diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. Like, you start the grieving process.
Yeah.
In those traumatic moments that you talk about when the information was coming back, it's a tumor, it's glioblastoma, it's fatal. It's a little piece of the grieving journey that's being kind of spooned out, in little increments.
And yeah, it's like, I think I even told you this. It's like this car accident that just keeps happening in slow motion. It just keeps happening. And like, oh, there's another hit. Oh, there's another roll, and it's like, it just kept on. And one of the struggles that I had, and I kind of shared this with Kira too when we were talking yesterday, when he did agree to go through radiation and chemo because we thought that it would help extend his life somewhat, maybe a few more months, maybe a year. And he was willing to do that for me and for us, even though he was pretty freaking miserable. And I'm really glad. I'm glad he did. I did get to take him to Colorado. I took him fishing. That was what he wanted to do.
So you started doing like a bucket list type of situation?
Well, it was really like, the offer was there, but he was too sick.
Right.
So he's like, I really just want to go up to the ranch and go fishing in Colorado. And so we went trout fishing, and our buddy actually built like a little dock out onto the river so that he could put his wheelchair up there because he couldn't stand. He couldn't even go to the bathroom by himself. In fact, to go to the toilet, I had to like stand there, or the nurse had to stand there and let him lean on us so that he could sit on a toilet because he couldn't sit up straight. So he had, just to transfer him from a car to a wheelchair was, it was physical, the whole thing. Like, it was very much lifting him everywhere, carrying him, holding him. Thank God he wasn't like a huge, he wasn't like 7 foot or something. He was my height.
He was able, he was lucid, and he could converse, and he was aware, and he knew who everybody was.
Absolutely.
And he understood, because you and I talked about, you were able to tell him every day that you loved him, and that the girls were going to be okay and everything. And I mean, I know that just is so hard to watch that person deteriorate like that, and it's very different from our experience, but equally as painful. And so I'm trying to find the silver lining. Like there was some.
You got to have goodbyes and hold hands and have conversations.
One of the things I told Kira was I actually called her when he was in the hospital. It was before he had his tumor removed, and we still thought it was benign, and we went and had lunch. And Robert was really glad I was going. He knew I was going too. And I said, "What was there anything that you wish you had been able to do, or that I should do? Like help me. Like I'm trying to prep." And she said, "Get all the passwords." That's the first thing out of her mouth.
Get all those passwords.
And I laughed. And I said, "Well, actually, we have this really cool encrypted thing that we share all of our passwords already. So that's
they
awesome."
were way more organized than we were.
Right.
It was pretty funny.
I think that was the first thing I said. I was caught off guard because I didn't know how serious it was. I knew he was in the hospital. I thought he was going to pull through, I guess, at that point. I didn't realize it was that dire. When you asked me that question, I was kind of thrown.
And then after that, you said, "But seriously," you said, "if I just had 2 more minutes with Frank in the car, I'd have told him how much I loved him and what an amazing father he was. And just I'd have really shown him and told him and made sure he knew." So I took that information back, and I spent as much time as I humanly could caring for Robert and making sure that he knew how much I loved him. Mm-hmm. And I did consult with him on a lot of things. We were kind of talking about financial things. I even said, "Well, what kind of car do you think I should get for the girls when they're 16?" I mean, we talked about things.
Sure.
That's really cool.
What did he say?
Said a used Lexus.
Okay.
I know. No, he was a car guy too.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
I know.
Yeah, those are questions like when they come up later, I'm like, should I sell the house right now? Should I not sell the house right now? Should I, keep your car just because I want to? Or, how do I tell the boys about dating? Or, I mean, all of these things. I had a friend whose husband died from cancer and her children were very little, and he wrote cards for every one of their birthdays up until they were 18 or 21.
Oh, wow.
Which really sounds amazing, but the kids got it was almost too much, and in a way having the recording and they can listen to it. But every year he had a little video and a card, but it was very difficult for her children to every year have that put on them. So it actually ended up for her family being very stressful instead of something that I think now that they're older, having all of those, but every year having to sit down and watch your dead dad tell you something, and having a card. It was a little bit
awkward.
Difficult for them. Yeah. It sounds like a great thing.
I was told by a therapist, a children's therapist, shortly after our accident that the kids will, re-grieve at every developmental phase. Mm-hmm. And that since Karis was the youngest, she had many phases still to go through. There's sort of like that school age phase, and then there's like the middle age adolescent phase, and then there's high school, and that they will re-grieve fully at every developmental stage. And that was just heartbreaking to me because I thought, well, how do I prepare for that for 3 kids going through different things?
After Robert died, and I have another friend whose husband died, and she was at the hospital constantly for like 10 months, and they had a daughter, and the daughter was kind of left to other people. So there was a repair that had to be done there, and she felt very guilty too, because she was like, I just wanted to spend as much time with my husband who wasn't going to be here. And in some ways, looking back, I feel like maybe I neglected my own child and maybe created another issue. It was very difficult to come back into that relationship. Did you find that to be true? Do you have any suggestions for people who may be going through that right now?
Yeah. So I absolutely felt that, it was basically let's call it January till the end of March. And then we were home and it was COVID, but I was facilitating the sale of our practice. And I had Robert who needed like 24/7 somebody by his side. So, you had asked about going to hospice care. I did. We went straight into hospice care and after rehab, hospice care. And I actually hired a independent nurse as well. Actually, I had a couple different ones, but one particularly that really gave so much time to my family and really helped me. And we had an amazing hospice nurse and hospice care. But a friend of mine in healthcare actually set that all up and facilitated having that ready when I got home from MD Anderson. But my kids, I did feel like when we got back home and even like, every other parent's online with their kids, during COVID, helping them school. I couldn't do that. I had no bandwidth left. I wasn't sleeping. I was doing everything I could to make sure Robert felt loved, but I was trying to take care of my kids too, who were still, at the time, 9 and 10. It was...
I can't even imagine. It was hard enough when you didn't have anything else going on, having all your kids in online school.
Right. And this fear that, add on top of that, if my kids do go out and bring COVID back, they would be the ones that killed their dad. I didn't want that. But I needed them to be out, but I needed
just
them.
Another layer of stress.
Yeah. So I say it was a blessing and a curse that they were home watching their dad die. They were home.
Were they having conversations with him?
Yes, they did.
They were little.
I think they both still have a little guilt that it was hard to just go in and lay in there with him because he was, not, he was coherent, but he wasn't like wanting to just sit and chat with them, I do remember Ava was, I guess, in 3rd grade at that point, and they do at Easter this washing of the feet. And so they sent home the job for the kids to do a washing of someone's feet and do a video of it. And Ava did her daddy's.
Do you have that video? Have you ever watched it?
Yeah.
Those are hard.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But yes, I did have a lot of, I felt like I was not as present for them in that because I couldn't do everything. And I had to be the family steward now. I had to be responsible for the money and for our clients. And then I also had to take care of him. And then I had to take care of them. And, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm drowning.
Right. You're in grief.
And what about like his parents' grief? You were telling us earlier that he was an only child.
Yeah. Robert was an only child.
His parents really... obviously I had a hard time with that.
Yeah. It's still hard for them. And I know that and I honor that. And I'm still very involved with them. And I do everything I can to take care of them as he did. But he was an only child. They had a daughter, Belinda, before Robert that had died at 3 months. And so they had already been through that trauma of losing an infant child, and then they lost him at 48. They're very involved, and they love my girls, and they take great care of them, and they really help me a lot, and they're very supportive of me. Family stepped in, helped a lot. Friends helped a lot. We had, at the time, my kids had been at St. Gabriel's other than when they went to Ross and Saunders, and the community at St. Gabriel's really stepped in. I asked them not to provide any food when Robert was sick. I didn't want any COVID germs coming into the house,
We were all wiping down our groceries.
I was too.
Like, what did you do? We were.
Yeah, it was so
crazy.
insane.
Yes. What I did was part of my loving Robert was I love to cook, and it's kind of my flow thing, and it does help me relax. But every day it'd be like, oh, what do you want to eat? Or whenever he'd get up and kind of, Melissa help bathe him or he'd get a massage. My friend Ani, who's still very close to our family, she's actually a therapist as well now, but she would come in and massage him like 2 or 3 times a week. And he was a little spoiled in that sense.
So what did you do for your own spirit?
Well, I did like cooking, so I would always cook him anything he wanted that afternoon, or run and get it.
I
He
mean,
was. They had him on massive steroids. So like, he
You can
would
tell the
still eat.
story about.
Oh, yeah. So, well, we both love Clark's. So we would go to Clark's a lot. And one of the funny stories was Melissa, the nurse, would help drive because I would sit in the back to kind of hold him because he did like kind of lean a little. So I would usually, and it took a lot just to get him in and out. So she would help. And so I would hold him. And he often wanted Clark's. So we'd go by Clark's and get a lobster roll, and they had those shoestring French fries.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, imagine trying to feed those to a
man.
person next to you in the car. I was like,
Oh, that
here,
is-
open your mouth wide. And I'd like
stick.
I hate
fries.
shoestring French
So-
fries.
Oh, but they're
He's
so
like,
good.
It's a love-hate relationship.
I don't like them. You can't
They're
put the
really
ketchup
good,
on there.
but they
They're
come
tiny,
in sort of like a it's
like a nest. Yeah.
like a haystack.
But he'd be starving.
They're
He'd be
not
like, give me
big, thick
fries, give me
fries.
fries.
Oh
I'm
my
like,
gosh.
okay. So I just like, and just stick them in his mouth. We ended up with so many French fries in the backseat of that car. That was funny. But one day, too, he's like, I want lobster. I was like, okay, I'll do lobster. I was like, I've never done a lobster. Okay, I'm going to do a lobster.
And we're in Central Texas.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not Maine.
So we leave Texas Oncology Radiation. He's like, I want lobster. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to run into Central Market. So I go into Central Market.
See if they got some lobster
Did you have
kicking
to
around.
wait in line to
Give
get
me
in?
the three big.
right,
I go,
'cause
I
it's
want
COVID.
3 live lobsters. And the guy's like, okay, which 3? I was like, that biggest one there and the biggest one there and the biggest one there. So I get these 3 massive
And you're like,
lobsters.
and can you tell me what I do? with
And
them?
and so I go back to the car. I get the lemons and the butter, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing it.
And they're alive.
They're alive. They're alive. I get back to the car, and Melissa goes, how are you going to cook these? That's so cool. I was like, I have no idea. I'm going to Google it. So
Google.
ask the Google.
Boil a pot of water.
Yeah. So I got out my big like crawfish boil. My husband's from New Orleans.
Yes,
I mean, he
right.
was,
So you had a big crawfish
yeah.
I had the
boil
crawfish
pot.
pot. I was
So I
going to
had
say
the
the
crawfish
pot
pot.
is
One.
like the most difficult thing to find.
And I had an outdoor burner, so I get it all. I have pictures of these lobsters, and I get them all done. And
This is true love.
he
guys.
comes
That
out.
is. Now I want
He sits
lobster.
down, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to crack them. And I'm like, oh, that is not cracking. The claws in this thing were like huge. We had to end up getting like a chisel
A hammer.
and a hammer to get
Oh
these
my
claws.
gosh.
But
But
I
this is
want
what
lobster.
my husband wants, and his final wishes is like, give me this. So I'm going to make it happen.
I had so much lobster. So the next day I made lobster bisque, which was really
Oh
good.
my gosh, I'm hungry now.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to go to Clark's after
I
this.
think to honor Robert, you should make us a huge lobster meal.
Yeah.
We'll at least go eat some of those fries.
But what if so cooking? But hold on, I want to get that. Cooking is one,
Oh,
but what
taking
else do
care of
you
me.
do for yourself? How did
So-
you find time for yourself, or did you?
So the only thing that I did, I started going to Pilates. I didn't want anybody around me. I was going to one lady with a mask,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
one lady and her dog, and she was doing like some energy work and like how I was holding energy in my body and Pilates. And I got so strong and it was amazing.
Oh, that's
and I loved
awesome.
it. And that was really good for me. And then I would go for walks at night with the dog around my neighborhood. And that was kind of my head clearing time. And I continued doing that for a while. And then, I mean, that was really kind of it when he was sick. And then after he died, Robert never liked me to bake when he was alive, because he would eat it.
Right.
So when he died, I remember like I got a little like crazy, and I remember one night I made 16 dozen cookies.
Oh my.
I was up like all night, and all my friends were like, Dana, you've got to stop making cookies, because
is not
I had to keep
Everybody
I had
else
to
was
keep
doing
giving.
the sourdough bread thing for
Sourdough
COVID.
starter.
She's in there. You should have. Yeah.
Starting up our own tistery.
That's right.
I was going to ask about, back up a little bit about accepting that he's going into hospice,
Yeah.
or hospice is coming to your house.
Yeah.
I just have a question about that, because my dad died of cancer 2 months after my husband died.
Yeah.
And he did not go on hospice until like 2 days before he died, because my mom was like, you only call hospice when they're dying. And I said, he's dying. I'm just curious how you accepted that and how long he was on hospice.
He was on hospice from the day we got home from MD Anderson, because he was so sick. I mean, we were in palliative care, which is,
Right.
yeah, it's the next step before hospice, right?
So
And
that's like March, but then did he pass away in October?
so he was
so-
on hospice the entire time.
Yeah.
It's not unheard of for people, from what I understand, to be on hospice up to a year.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was just
it can be.
It's basically if they know you're going to die within the next 6 to 12 months. That's usually
right.
or when it's just completely
And
terminal.
you were like obviously accepting and like, yes, come in.
Well, we needed the support.
You needed
I
help,
wasn't
yeah.
saying he's dead. I just said, yeah, I need the support.
need help.
And a lot of times they won't let you if you're doing like radiation or chemo, but because it's a glioblastoma and you're going to die anyway, all it does is prolong it, possibly. So
Still considered.
it's still
meets the
considered
criteria.
Yeah.
What would you tell someone that's starting this journey for themselves?
Get passwords.
Get your passwords.
That's it. That is a absolute true statement, by
Yeah.
the way. I would, in addition to what Kira said about making sure they know how much you love them, and I thought about a lot of things. Like I was like, oh, let's do this video, and you tell about your life story. And he didn't have the energy. He didn't feel like doing that. We didn't have. I mean, he didn't feel like writing. He didn't feel like recording a video or more, voice recordings. I mean, he really didn't. He could talk to me. And
Did you write stuff down?
I did. I wrote down some stuff he would do, and I would put in some notes. And a lot of the conversations centered around financial things that he felt like I needed to know or needed to do.
The thing that I loved, which I haven't really heard about, was that you guys renewed your vows.
Oh.
So,
And whose idea was that? Was that
well, it's
something
kind
he
of,
wanted to do?
kind of a funny thing. So we like to laugh. We went away and got married in Hawaii, and we had been engaged for 3 years, and we decided like 2 weeks before finally that we were going to get married. I was like, oh, okay, finally. And so we went away to Hawaii and got married, but we didn't have like a Catholic
Ceremony.
sacrament. And we kept saying we're going to do it, and then our priest retired, and like we didn't, and we kept not doing our sacrament. So
Were you guys not married in the eyes of the Catholic Church?
no, we're living in sin.
Ooh,
Well, for
dicey.
people who aren't Catholic, what is the sacrament? Is it just doing like a mass during the?
It's basically having the priest make your marriage blessed and legit. Yeah, it's
It
the marriage
legitimizes
sacrament.
it.
It legitimizes it.
Catholic.
In the eyes of the
Catholic,
Catholic
in the eyes of the
faith
Catholic
world.
faith,
Yes.
yeah.
And, I mean, Robert and I were having many conversations then around, the possibility of cremation, because at our church, we have what they call a columbarium, which stands for like Dove's Nest. And there's 2 spots in each one. And I was looking at different burial places in Austin, and I was like, basically we're going to drive outside of the city, or there's one central Austin, but I mean, there's just not a lot of great options. And I said, but if you want to be married at our church at St. John Newman, then you have to be cremated. And he just really wasn't like hip on that. And then he said, well, I want to talk to the priest about it. I was like, okay, well, we'll talk about it. And he did. And then he said, well, what do you think? I said, I think it's great. He said, I'd rather be close by you guys and know that you would come to see me, every Sunday instead of, or after church, instead of having me out where it'd only be every once in a while. And I think some of that just strikes on your, he wants to make sure he's remembered. I would never forget him. But, I said, well, if you will do it, I will do it with you.
Well,
So-
at least that's good, because we all have our guys' ashes and they're just sitting on a bookshelf. I mean,
Mine are in the closet.
I feel like we need to do something with them, but I'm like,
We're in the
well,
closet over here.
Yeah.
Like I say, they can watch
They
us
watch you
change
get dressed.
clothes.
That's funny.
They watch us.
I have, okay, so, in my grief, and Robert did end up passing of shingles. He had shingles that last week, and we think that he got maybe a lesion on the brain, but that's ended up what really took him down. And so it kind of happened a little faster than what we thought when that hit. And that's something that nobody tells you is a lot of people with cancer end up getting shingles.
So did he get the shingles and then you were like, let's renew the vows? And
No,
the
I'm sorry. Back to the vows. It was COVID once again. And everything was touch and go every day. It was like, oh, does he feel well enough to do this? Does he feel well? And we did end up in April. And I want to say it was April 20th. It might have been the 18th. We ended up doing our vows up in the little chapel at St. John Newman with just my girls and my in-laws. And one of our nannies was there just with the girls. And we renewed our vows, and he barely felt well enough to do it. But we went up to the church, and I say vow renewal sacrament, and Father Red did our little ceremony, and then we went down to the grave site where he would be buried, and we took a little family picture down there. And
so he went and saw
Where he would be.
he
the
chose
gravesite.
he chose the spot where he would be. He said, "Someday when my girls get married, I'm going to be right there on the right of the right of the aisle." He's bottom right of the aisle, like.
Oh,
That's awesome. I guess
I
I'll
don't know
just
if they'll
drag
get-
my guy's box.
And what's funny about the ashes, though?
Yeah.
So we hadn't had time to like really talk. I'd bought the columbarium spots, and I bought ones for my girls, and then for his parents as well.
Oh, wow. Everybody's going to be
Everybody
there.
gets
Big old
buried
party
there.
over there.
I ended up, though, when it came down to like parting with his ashes and then like putting it in there, I was like, well, maybe I should keep some because maybe we want to scatter some. So I'm at the funeral home. I'm like, maybe we want to scatter some. And I was like, well, how many cases?
Like, I need
don't
a little
know.
to-go
I don't know.
baggie.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
they do.
And then I was like, well, maybe I should do one of those diamonds that they make. Like, well, maybe I should do that. Well, maybe, and it was too many things to decide. And I was like, how about you just keep about half of them? They're like 2 cups. I'm like, great.
Yes. Yeah. So where are those 2 cups?
Well, they stayed at the funeral home for quite a while because I didn't know what to do. I was like,
Right.
I don't know how to deal with this.
deal with them.
It's life.
So finally, like only about a month ago, I called my best friend Leslie. I said, can you do something for me? She said, yeah, sure, what? I was like, will you call the funeral home and go get Robert's ashes? She's like, yeah, sure. Okay. And she's like, I'll be there on Friday. And I was like, okay. And I was out of town. I was taking my girls to school, and she called me. She's like, okay, where do you think they should go? I was like, you are so awesome. I was like, somewhere in my study? She's like, I was thinking that too. She's like, okay, I've rearranged the shelves. They're right here. I got the ashes. So you know what? I'm going to move forward. As I said in my eulogy, I will never move on. He will always be here with me, but I will move forward. I took on like a little motto, and I think it's so funny because your opening intro says it, and I wrote on this piece of paper on my desk, said, thrive, not just survive.
Mm.
And I said, that's going to be my goal. I'm going to thrive, not just survive this. So one of the things that when you have a spouse that's dying of cancer, the craziness comes out of the woodworks. Like, oh, you can cure it with this.
Oh, right.
Yeah, here's this,
Lick this toad.
her horse dewormer, which, yeah.
Right.
Crazy stuff comes out of the woodwork, right? I mean, crazy, crazy stuff. So it's so hard when those things come about. And even like we considered doing him being a part of a trial, but everything couldn't happen fast enough. But I remember, and I did at the behest of my friend Ani, my massage therapist / friend / healer.
Yes.
She's everything. She said, well, I want you to consider seeing this therapist I know, Barbara. And I said, okay. I said, well, I've seen therapists. I've had all the therapy. I don't have time for therapy. I've had all the therapy I need. I'm ready. I can deal. I've got this. I don't have time for that. And then she said it again, like a couple of weeks later. I was like, she's like, her husband just died of, something very similar, like some kind of tumor or some kind of, cancer. And I said, okay, well, I might consider going to her since she's a therapist and she's a widow. I might consider it. And I met her, and I just fell in love with her. And she had lost her husband. She lost her husband April 25th, and I lost my husband October 25th, so 6 months later. And I had started seeing her that summer. And I remember explaining to her, because once again, I'm very visual. I remember telling her one day that I felt like I lived in this state of like, I imagined myself as like this stick figure, like spread eagle over this really pointed mountain. And it was just like splitting me. Because on one side, it was Robert living and being cured and everything being great. And on the other side, it was me accepting that he was going to die. And I said, I don't know which one to live in. I want to live in this. I hope he's going to live, but I know that he's going to fucking die. So where do I live? How do I do this? Because I am just being torn apart every day by this. And I had, my in-laws being very, wanting him to
Hopeful,
live, and everyone, wanting, oh, well, there's this miracle cure and there's this,
The dewormer out. Let's try it.
Yeah, we did. Gave him that dewormer every day. It's made by Hearts, I think.
Completely worm free.
Let's see if they'll give us a sponsorship. He was
worm free.
Let's see if they'll give us a sponsorship. Hearts. So I just remember feeling split by this. And I said, I don't know. I said, I can't live with this like feeling of being like, I wanna be hopeful, but I have to just accept and be prepared. And it's really hard to go through that grieving process when you're losing your spouse and you're watching them die and they're getting even sicker and going downhill even more. And it's hard not. I do remember he had suffered so much. I remember when he died feeling some relief, not for me, but for him.
I think that's so normal for anybody that's has
you don't want them to
terminal
be in pain.
illness or watching a loved one in pain. You're like, well, now they're at peace, right? I mean, there is a part of that, even though you're devastated. But
by the way, Barbara said, Dana, she said, you need to take that and you just need to float over to one side and imagine floating over and then come back and then just float over to the other side and see how it feels. Instead of feeling like you're constantly like in this state of being split, you just need to float to both sides. So I kind of changed my vision of it and that really helped me.
Yeah. So do you feel him around you? Do you have certain things that are signs from him, songs or butterflies?
I have seen a lot of signs from Robert. And like I said, a whole other episode. But I recognize now that I don't need to take each sign as a positive or a negative, as an affirmation or a warning, one or the other. I don't need to do it either way. I need to recognize, because I was taking them all as a positive. I was like, oh, that means I'm supposed to go date that crazy man. No.
Oh, right.
Okay, no. Okay, no. He did not mean that. He was at that window going, get away from him.
Right.
Right. So I need to recognize that I won't always know if it's a positive or negative, and I can't take it that way. I just have to take it as he is here with me. And it was, I had this rose bush that came out of nowhere in my backyard. And I was like, I've never had this rose bush before. Like, it may have been a little rose bush, but it came out. It was like massive.
Oh, that's
and
so
I was
cool.
like, this is crazy. There was a hummingbird that got in the garage one day and like just kept fluttering above his car.
I think it's really brave. It was hard for me when we first started this. I know it was hard for all of us to kind of dig back into the darkest days that we've ever faced, and to have to share those stories. So we appreciate you coming in. I know it's not easy, and we're really glad to have you here.
Well, I'm really grateful for you ladies, because I binge listened to all your first episodes, and I loved them. But I want to say that, one of the things Robert and I had really started focusing on as a couple, as a family, was on gratitude. And when I lost him, I said, you know what? I'm going to take the only real silver lining I can take out of this, and that is, I am so grateful that I had such an amazing partner and husband and father to my children, and he's still there. And even though no one will ever love me exactly the way Robert did, and I will never love someone else exactly the way I loved Robert, there's different ways you love people. I will always love Robert. And any man that comes into my life will have to be a strong enough man to live with that love.
Yeah, that's that's definitely something that whoever comes in next for any of us, they're going to have to be a strong man to share the space with our strong men.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks again, Dana. I hope everybody listening has gotten some inspiration from her story and maybe a little bit of hope for the future, because you can survive and you definitely have the choice on whether to thrive or not. So thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Dana.
Thanks.
Bye.